For years, Facebook and Instagram have been at the center of one of the biggest debates in modern technology. How much responsibility should social media companies have for the effects their platforms can have on children and teenagers? Now, that question has reached a stunning new level. Meta Platforms, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, has agreed to a massive settlement with US states over allegations that its platforms were designed in ways that could encourage young users to spend excessive amounts of time online. The agreement could ultimately cost Meta as much as $18 billion. And that makes this far more than another lawsuit against a major technology company. It could represent a turning point in the way America regulates social media. At the center of the case are allegations that Meta deliberately designed Facebook and Instagram to keep young people engaged. State officials argued that features such as personalized recommendations, notifications, endless scrolling, and other engagement mechanisms could encourage compulsive use. The states also accused Meta of misleading the public about the potential risks its platforms pose to children. Meta has not admitted wrongdoing as part of the settlement, but the company has agreed to sweeping changes in the way teenagers use Facebook and Instagram. The agreement involves nearly all US states and brings an enormous collection of legal claims toward a resolution. The financial figure getting the most attention is $16.7 billion. That amount is associated with claims brought by 29 states. But the broader agreement could reach approximately $18 billion when additional commitments and conditions are included. That makes this one of the largest legal settlements ever involving a technology company. But the money may not be the most important part of the story. The real significance could be what Meta has agreed to change. Under the settlement, teenage users will face stronger restrictions on how they use Facebook and Instagram. One of the most dramatic measures is a daily usage limit. Teenagers could be restricted to approximately 2 hours of use per day under the new system. The platforms will also introduce restrictions designed to reduce nighttime use. Notifications can be disabled during school hours. Certain features will be restricted by default, and Meta will strengthen protections around teenage accounts. The company will also introduce stronger age verification measures. That creates another complicated question. How do you protect children online without creating an entirely new privacy problem? Age verification can help platforms determine who is actually a minor. But more aggressive verification can also require companies to collect or process additional personal information. That means the technology designed to protect teenagers could itself create new concerns about privacy. The settlement also focuses on the way content is presented to teenagers. Personalized recommendations have become one of the most powerful features of modern social media. The algorithm learns what users watch, what they like, what they share, and what keeps them coming back. The more a person interacts with the platform, the more precisely the system can predict what they might want to see next. For adults, that may simply be an addictive convenience. For teenagers, regulators argue the consequences can be much more serious. Young people are still developing emotionally and psychologically. Their habits, self-image, relationships, and understanding of the world can be heavily influenced by what they see online. And social media does not simply show users random content. It continuously selects what appears next. That means the algorithm can become part of a teenager's daily environment. Critics of Meta have argued that the company understood the power of these systems. They say the problem was not simply that teenagers were using social media. The problem was that the platforms were allegedly optimized to keep them using it. That distinction is extremely important. A traditional product becomes more valuable when people use it because it solves a problem. Social media companies operate under a different incentive. Their business models depend heavily on attention. The longer users remain on a platform, the more opportunities there are to show advertising. That creates an enormous economic incentive to maximize engagement. And engagement is not always the same thing as well-being. A platform can be successful at keeping someone online, even if that person eventually feels worse after using it. That is where the legal battle becomes much bigger than Facebook or Instagram. It becomes a question about the fundamental economics of the attention economy. For years, technology companies have argued that users ultimately choose how they use their products. If someone spends hours scrolling through Instagram, the company can argue that the individual made that decision. But critics say that argument ignores how these products are engineered. Push notifications can bring users back. Infinite scrolling removes natural stopping points. It will depend on whether these measures actually change behavior, and that may take years to determine. There is also the enormous financial question. Is $16.7 billion enough to punish a company like Meta? Meta is one of the world's largest technology companies. Its business generates enormous amounts of revenue. A settlement of this size sounds almost unimaginable to an ordinary person. But for a company of Meta's scale, the economic impact must be considered differently. A penalty can be enormous in absolute terms, while still being manageable for a multinational corporation. That is why the behavioral changes may ultimately matter more than the headline dollar figure. If Meta simply writes a check and continues operating exactly as before, critics may say the settlement failed. But if the agreement forces the company to redesign the way teenagers interact with its platforms, the consequences could be much larger. The settlement could change the product itself, and that may be the real punishment. There is also a historical comparison worth considering. Some of the biggest changes in corporate behavior have happened when governments moved beyond fines and demanded changes to business practices. The important question is not always how much money a company pays. It is what the company is no longer allowed to do afterward. That is why this case matters beyond Meta. The legal system is beginning to confront a new type of corporate power. Technology companies can influence billions of people simultaneously. Their algorithms can determine what people see. And for teenagers, the rules of social media may soon look very different from the experience their parents had growing up. The internet is no longer simply a place people visit. For many young people, it is part of everyday life. That means the rules governing it will increasingly shape childhood itself. And that may be the most important lesson from Meta's enormous settlement. The fight is no longer just about Facebook. It is about who controls the digital environment in which the next generation grows up. For years, Silicon Valley largely determined the rules of that environment. Now governments, courts, parents, and regulators are demanding a seat at the table. The question is whether these new rules will actually make social media safer, or whether the technology will simply find new ways to keep users coming back. Because if the settlement succeeds, it could mark the beginning of a safer era for young users. But if it fails, the lawsuits against Meta may only be the first chapter of an even bigger confrontation between governments and the technology industry. And the next battle could be even more expensive.